The man who once said he would take a bullet for Donald Trump testified against him today at the former president's criminal trial in New York.
Jared Hill reports from outside the courthouse.
What do you have to say?
Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former longtime personal lawyer and fixer, took the stand Monday.
You plan on telling the truth?
In his testimony, Cohen detailed so-called catch-and-kill operations to quash unfavorable press about his former boss. Cohen implicated Trump in a 2015 effort to kill a false negative story a Trump Tower doorman had been shopping. Cohen testified that Trump told him, quote, "Make sure that this story doesn't get out. You handle it."
The prosecution has to portray Cohen as a fixer who was, the henchman to Donald Trump, close to him, set on, doing his dirty work.
Cohen's $130,000 payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels is at the heart of the case. Prosecutors say Trump directed Cohen to make the payment ahead of the 2016 election to keep Daniels quiet about an alleged 2006 sexual encounter with Trump. Prosecutors say Trump then engaged in election fraud by classifying checks Cohen received as legal payments when they were really reimbursements for the Daniels deal meant to sway the election. The former president has pleaded not guilty and says the encounter with Daniels didn't happen.
Got no evidence, and I'm innocent.
With former President Trump under a gag order not to talk about witnesses, he didn't comment on Michael Cohen's testimony today. Instead, Trump allies attacked Cohen's credibility.
This guy is a convicted felon. Does any reasonable, sensible person believe anything that Michael Cohen says? I don't think that they should.
Michael Cohen has admitted to lying under oath. He also served jail time on federal charges related to these payments. Jared Hill, CBS News, New York.
And joining us today for some perspective on this ongoing trial is former federal prosecutor turned defense attorney Rick Convertino. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So Michael Cohen, a household name as of the last few years, and supposedly the prosecution's star witness. Do you think he delivered as the star witness?
So far, all I can tell is from what I read from the feeds online and what I see on the cable news networks. Of course, I'm not in the courtroom, can't see the witness or the jury, but by all accounts, he's been credible, he's been calm, direct, succinct in his answers. Cohen is not the story here. He's the conduit to the story. The story is the documentation, which is in the form of text messages, emails, phone records. There's a plethora of confirming documentation regarding the payments. What he's doing is filling in the interstitial gaps. So how I would handle Cohen as a prosecutor would be to do what they're doing, and then at the end of the case, in closing arguments, say, now here's how we can corroborate his testimony and go through the steps to corroborate it. And then at the end say, well, and if you take Michael Cohen out of this case, if you don't believe him, discount everything he said. Let's just take him out of the case. And what do we have? A strong circumstantial case. So I think the case is going in exactly as the prosecution intends at this point. I think it's plotting, it's yeoman-like, but all of the checks are being, the boxes are being checked so far. And I think that the evidence is coming in exactly as they think it should.
And talking about his credibility, Trump's team is trying to paint him as an unreliable witness, but we know he was Trump's fixer. What do you make of that move?
Well, there were 3 people involved in the intimate details of what the prosecution alleged is to be the cover-up, and the cover-up is for the purpose of preventing the information from coming out, which would be for the purpose of swaying the election. And there are 3 people, and those 3 people are Weissenberg, Michael Cohen, and Donald Trump. Of those 3, 2 have served prison time. 1 is currently in jail in Rikers Island. So when that comes out, it hasn't come out yet, but Michael Cohen will tell the jury, I've been convicted for this very crime, and he was. So what he lied about, what he's going to say he lied about, was the cover-up for his boss, Mr. Trump, and that's, I think, it goes a long way to further his credibility. So he's being quite candid, quite forthcoming about his faux pas, his flaws, his mistakes, his errors, and his criminality so far. He's not shying away from it, and that's exactly what has to be done in the direct examination. You have to front that out so it doesn't come as a surprise in cross-examination. Yeah. And there'll be a lot more of that because he's going to be on a whole one more day with the prosecution before he goes to cross-examination. So 2 days of direct examination is a pretty long time.
From what you've seen, though, is there a risk with the jury? I mean, admitting I did lie, but this was the reason. If you're an admitted liar, is that going to be a difficult thing for a juror to get over? Is there kind of a once a liar, always a liar thing? Do you tend to see that in cases?
I think that the key and the only way to go about this is to front it off and be honest about your lies. You know, I had a case one time where a defendant refused to tell the truth to me while he was in jail, and I said, look, you know, if you're not going to be honest with me, he said, well, here's the reason why I'm not telling it, because it would make me look bad in the case, you know, in front of the jury, because I hated my ex-wife. I said, hey, that's great. Get out there and say that, because there's not a juror who can't, you know, is not going to understand that 100%. And there's not a juror who's not going to understand that he lied for the purpose to protect his boss, his friend, you know, this is a person whose livelihood he depended on.
And let's talk about Stormy Daniels' testimony last week. How damaging was that?
Well, I think it was. I think they could have done without her testimony completely. You know, remember what this case is about. It's about the documents. It's about the fraudulent displays on the documentation that were filed with the state of New York. She had nothing to do with that, whatever. So I think I would have asked her maybe one question, and that is, you know, do you know anything about the documents? Do you know how they were filed? Do you know anything about what was placed on those records regarding this transaction? Her answer would be no, and that has no effect on her whole testimony. Whether she did or didn't have sex with Donald Trump is immaterial for the purposes of proving this case.
This has been going on for a while now, but it could be starting to wrap up pretty soon. As of right now, where do you think this is headed?
Well, I followed it fairly closely as I could, given the facts that, you know, you can't get in the courtroom, of course. But it seems to me that the prosecution has a strong case. I don't know what the defense can present that would rebut most of this, but I think it's going to either be one of two things: a conviction or a hung jury, because you have the possibility of having a hero juror in this case. You know, somebody who wants to write a book, somebody who wants to be, you know, acclaimed, who wants to take, you know, their 15 minutes of fame and maybe just hold out. But the elements of each count, I think, have been proven so far beyond a reasonable doubt, and I think that the jury would come back if they synthesize, analyze the facts, apply the law as they're instructed to do. I think that this will be a guilty verdict on 34 counts.
Wow. All right. It would be historic if so. Rick Convertino, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you both.